Tanya gets all the credit because she organized lunch and refreshments and all that good stuff. But as she said, I'm James Steen, so I'm full-time on the campus of Houston Baptist University. So I'm a full-time enrollment manager. I worked at Baylor for 13 years. I've been at HBU for 14. And basically I get to do this on the side. So I enjoy going out for, maybe one client at a time to work with other campuses on enrollment and recruitment, marketing type issues for Ruffalo and Leavitt. So it has been my honor and pleasure to be on campus. This is my 11th visit to campus. So there was one other one that was a retention exclusively focused visit with a different consultant. So this is my 11th time in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. It's a great place. But I grew up in Little Rock, so I am not unfamiliar to Arkansas, and that's one of the other things that has been such a blessing is I can fly into Little Rock, see my parents, spend the night there, and then drive up here to consult for a couple days on the back end. So thank you all for being here. Enjoy your lunch, sit tight. What I'm going to try to do is save all of the discussion dialogue towards the end. I've got a couple questions and prompts at the end to allow us to do a little bit of dialogue, but hopefully I can kind of crank through some slides, get you thinking about a few things. I'll ask a few leading questions along the way, but ultimately I want the next hour, we'll see if it takes us longer than that, how talkative you are, but at least the next hour to be helpful and productive for you. So I want to talk about, obviously, the students who we're serving and kind of frame this in a way to say, most of you, is everybody here kind of advising either directly, indirectly, in some form or fashion? So I see a lot of head nods. Most of us are interacting with students on a regular basis. So that's the main thing, right? How are we serving our students? So I want to talk about who these students are that we're serving, maybe what their expectations are. For those of you who are advising on the front lines on a regular basis, I've got some advising best practices from Ruffalo and Leavitt that I'll kind of touch on. I'll spend the most time talking about service excellence and what does that look like and how can we, by serving our students better, hopefully improve retention and student success. So that's what we hope to accomplish here. And the assumption is, at least I know I've been here long enough, that quality service is definitely a priority here, right? We're a smaller institution. We care about students. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care about students. And so we don't have to really talk about why that's an important thing. That's definitely an assumption. Everyone here is focused on that in some form or fashion. The student's perception of this place, though, is definitely shaped by all of these interactions. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. But every interaction that you have with students is helping to shape their impression of this place and what they think Williams Baptist is. And obviously you're already a part of that positive impression that we're trying to help students get a hold of. So we know from a statistical, quantitative as well as qualitative data that service excellence helps retention. Obviously, if we can improve retention rates, we can improve their completion rates, persistence, progression, retention, and ultimately graduation. And it even helps potentially develop some annual givers, right? Maybe not for 25 years or so, but eventually we hope that these students will be contributing alumni, right? So student excellence, or service excellence I should say, is a big part of a longitudinal process, not just trying to fix something here in the interim. There was a survey that R+L conducted back in 2019. I can't even read these stats, right? So I'm not sure you can either. But an interesting one that as a call out here this top bullet point, one of the top things that students said is a concern and something that they hope to get out of college is meeting new friends. Well, guess what? It's a little bit harder to even do that these days with these masks on, right? It's hard for us to communicate with one another. It's hard for them. And now we've got to socially distance, right? So now if they want to hang out and meet friends, what are we doing? We're telling them to move apart and be with your group. Don't take your mask off, right? So things that they said are important to them are even more of a challenge, obviously, during COVID. But most of them say, 95% of them said that they intend to finish their college degree. Does anybody know what our graduation rate is here?
36.
Yeah, so we got some work to do, right? Now, what I would suggest is that a lot of the students that start here probably do finish somewhere else, right? And we don't always know those statistics, but I'm not going to pick on graduation rate. My 6-year graduation rate is 48% at HBU. Baylor was a little bit different, but the kind of institution we are at HBU, we serve a pretty diverse, a lot of first-gen population, lower socioeconomic status, and 6-year graduation rate is only 48%, right? So for a lot of us, the type of institution that we are, there's a whole lot that we can do, hopefully, to improve on that and get those graduation rates at least not to 95%, but helping these students complete a college degree. This talks about career services, that's a need that they have, potentially as a gap here. We don't have anybody who is 100% focused on career services. That's what these stats are talking about, breaking out what freshmen said. And it's also true that parents these days are very involved in their kids' lives, right? This survey said, when you look at somewhat involved and very involved, 94% of high school students that reported their parents were involved in this process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you probably, as parents, with your own children, are involved, but students these days, their parents are way, way, way more involved, probably than our parents were in our generation, right? We call Generation Z digital natives. So we've had the millennials. The millennials have kind of cycled through. The millennials are all out in the workforce now. Now we have Generation Z coming to college. And we call them the digital natives because they have never known life without a cell phone or a smartphone with them 24/7, right? They don't remember when we used to go on a road trip without a cell phone or without, a map device, with us at all times, or without the ability to text. We would have to stop at a gas station and put a dime in a phone and say, hey, Mom, I'm just stopping off in such and such. I'm about 3 hours out, right? You remember those days? We didn't have cell phones. They have no concept, right, of life without this smart device. And obviously, all the other forms of media are declining, and digital consumption continues to climb every year. Generation Z, 87% of them, and this was a few years ago. I don't see the year, I'm not wearing my glasses. This was several years ago, but 87% of them said they are never without their device, right? They're never without this thing. Now, maybe that benefits us a little bit now that we're asking them to do more digitally and remotely because of social distancing and everything. But literally, from the moment they wake up until they go to bed, and even while they're sleeping, it's right there next to them, right? So this is a whole new, different kind of dynamic, right? I think it's one that we can leverage. I think we are with iPads and other things that we're doing with students to leverage this digital technology. But this is a different kind of generation. This was a the video. I tried to show it yesterday, it didn't really work. Again, this is more information from that survey, key trends for freshmen, what motivates them. The call out is this generation that we're serving, Gen Z, they very much expect personalization, right? The days of, dear student letters are over, right? Everything's personalized, and of course we have databases that allow us to do that these days, one-to-one marketing, all these different things. They're accustomed, they don't know any different, right? Everything's personalized. Relationship building, it looks very, very different, right? Because of these devices. They build relationships through social media and through group meetings and other things. They're an instant fulfillment kind of a generation, right? They expect everything at their fingertips. So when they ask for something or when they expect something and it doesn't happen instantly or they don't get it instantly, that becomes a source of frustration. And of course, it's the whole anytime, anywhere access. So in terms of how they initiate communication, very often it's at their convenience. And they expect you to be available to them when it's convenient. Do you ever get emails or phone calls or text messages from students like at 11 o'clock at night when we're not on the clock, right? We're not really taking calls. My FYS students, I had one, blowing me up with a question, and it was almost midnight, and I was already in bed, but I got up the next morning, and I'm seeing all these texts and a missed call and a voicemail. I'm sorry, I don't answer my phone after a certain point of time. I don't keep my phone right by the bed, right? But they expect us to be available to them when it's convenient for them. This whole idea of sustained interaction, right? They're always busy and connected. And obviously information that's pertinent to them may not always be information that we deem to be pertinent, or information that we think is important may not always be important or prioritized by them. So again, these are all things, you deal with this on a regular basis. They still have a need to matter, they still have a need to belong, but belonging looks a little bit different these days. And of course, COVID has even made that more of a challenge. And then we go back to the parents. So most of you have heard of helicopter parents, right? So helicopter parents were kind of the millennials. Well, I think these days we have lawnmower parents. And lawnmower parents, they basically smooth out all the bumps. They smooth out all the crises. They handle things for their children in a way that doesn't allow them to learn how to problem solve, right? Because the parents solve the problems for their kiddos. So if they are struggling in class and they get a bad grade, it's not, have you talked to your professor about that? It's, I'm going to call your professor about that, right? So and they're in college. They're adults, right? Do you ever get phone calls from parents? Have you gotten emails from parents? That's becoming part of the norm. And so now we have a generation of students who they go off to college and they've never had to deal with a bump in the road or a crisis or something blows up in their life, and it's like they don't know how to handle it, right? So we're in some ways we've done our students a disservice by trying to help them too much, right? Because they're not learning how to problem solve, how to fix things, how to manage some of these problems and crises on their own. So lawnmower parents are a real thing these days. Of course, COVID isn't helping, they still want to have a traditional college experience. Let's all hope and pray they will, if we can get past this year and 2021, maybe we'll have a vaccine and hopefully we'll be able to move forward past this someday. Now the president has COVID, so who knows what's going to happen. But this whole COVID crisis has even kind of made everything even more intense, right? With them needing to stay in deeper contact, more frequent contact. They've said they need more financial assistance. I think that's a real thing. Being over financial aid, I know we have students who are legitimately struggling to close the gap with parents who are not as employable, maybe post-COVID, as they were before COVID. Parents plan to borrow more, right? So there are real issues and struggles that they're dealing with that obviously affect what it is we're trying to do. So in terms of advising best practices, I'm not going to go into all these, but one of the things that I do want to encourage us to do is really focus on what is your definition of advising. Not you personally, but what is Williams Baptist University, what is your definition of advising? And that's something, if we had more time for a workshop, we might try to do together. But I think that's something that comes out of this is we need to be really clear about how we're defining advising and what we hope to accomplish for our students with this. Obviously, advising should be, I would argue, a part of the strategic plan for the institution because it is so critical to students' success. We've got to have adequate resources to do advising. We can't just say, go advise your students and not provide you the tools and the resources that you need to get it done. Who's responsible for which group? We need to define all of that. And I think I would have a task force or a committee work on how to constantly improve and make this process better, right? Because ultimately, good advising is going to help retain and help more students be successful. So that's ultimately what these best practices are about. In terms of a definition, if we have a mutually agreed upon definition, hopefully it decreases the disconnect between what this department thinks advising is and what this department thinks it is, and maybe what this staff member thinks it is. Hopefully, if we've got a clear definition of advising, we all know what we're doing and what our part is in that process so that we can have some consistency and even raise the importance of advising in the sense that bad advising can really derail a student, right? But then there's even, going beyond that, there's a lot that goes into advising that's way, 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 way more involved than just picking classes, right? So what is the definition that really helps us maintain that consistency and then reinforces the goals on what we're trying to accomplish with that? A couple of things here. Arnell would say you've got prescriptive advising, which is basically just helping them pick classes, and there's the developmental part of it where you're really trying to dig into who they are as a person and what their purposes are in life, what their goals are, and then how do you bring all of that together in terms of academic, career planning, and support that they need is ultimately what that's trying to get at. This is basically steps on how to write a definition. The goals for advising, obviously self-understanding, self-acceptance. That's more that developmental model, considering their life's goals. Like, what do you really want to do, right? And then sometimes it's you want to be a doctor. Well, you've got an 18 on the ACT, so that's going to be a challenge. Now, how do you say that? How do you encourage that, right? How do you help them, considering their life's goals, find a plan that maybe works best for them, right? So that's the whole purpose and goal of advising. Decision-making skills, which, let's be honest, a lot of these 18, 19-year-olds don't always make the best decisions, right? And unfortunately, they're not always prepared when they come talk to you about what they should be doing in their life goals, right? They kind of show up, well, I was just told to show up, right? There's some preparation that goes into that. How do we help them Support services, obviously what they're trying to do, these are some models for academic advising that you can't read. What type of advising do we do here at Williams? So, do we have staff advisors? Do we have faculty advisors? I think that's the majority of the case. I know Mary does some staff advising. You know, do we have career services support and advisors or peer advisors, right? So what are the different models that are out there, and how are we utilizing these to fit together into our model for advising? The expectations for advisors obviously go beyond just picking courses, get into career and academic goals. Their program, their major obviously is a huge part of that. We have to make sure that they have the ability to do that sometimes. Not everybody does. Moving towards their career goals, obviously. Our expectation is that as an advisor, we're made aware when they try to drop or add a class, right? Maybe that's a non-issue. I would say at least for an underclassman, before they go drop a class or add another one, as an advisor, I think we would want to know that and make sure that they're making a good decision. Sometimes they don't realize if they drop a class, well, it's just too much right now, so I'm going to drop that class. Sometimes they don't realize if they fall below full-time hours, that Pell Grant that they have is going to go away, right? That financial aid that they have, all of a sudden is going to go away or at least get prorated. So there are implications for bad decisions. And as advisors, we need to help guide them through some of those things. There's expectations for advisees, right? They've got to do their part. You can't advise somebody that's not prepared, that doesn't show up. Have you ever had somebody you're supposed to advise and you're the one calling them? I need to advise you. You need to come by my office. You need to call me back. Well, they have to do their part, right? We can only do so much hand-holding. At some point, they have to take responsibility for doing what they're supposed to do. They need to show up prepared, right? They need to do their homework. It's not just you telling them what to do. It's you hopefully having a conversation with them about what they need to be doing. So again, there's expectations that go both ways. In terms of training, professional development, obviously there's conceptual skills, there's informational skills, relational skills. All of these kind of fit together to form this super advisor role, right? And I guarantee you, you're doing this in some form or fashion in terms of how are you relating to students, how are you guiding them and helping them get the information that they need and understand why they need to take this class in this order and do all these things, right? This is all part of the process that hopefully you, as faculty advisors, deal with on a regular basis. So I'm just going to throw a question out there so I can hear you speak for a minute and hopefully take a drink of water. But what are some of the challenges that you struggle with in terms of advising here at WVU? Or maybe there are no challenges, I don't know.
I would say in our department, it's having the time to provide that developmental assistance beyond just reception or restricted.
Absolutely,
We
absolutely,
have some of the students,
absolutely. What department again?
business.
Okay, yeah. How many advisors in business?
Advisors or advisees?
How many are advisors, so 2 advisors, and then you basically are doing everybody who's business, okay? Which is about how many?
100.
Okay. So you've got to advise 50 students basically each semester, yeah. Yeah, that can be daunting. That can be daunting. I get that. What else?
Right now, COVID
Mhm.
is interfering with the advisors, because I'm just trying to get students to come in and get tests retaken, or taken and just doing that type of,
Yeah.
and then, everything else kind of just falls by the way, and then the interaction too, whereas most of us had an open door policy.
Absolutely.
And now, you know, one person at a time or
Yes.
scheduling.
Yes.
It really cuts down on their ability to feel like they can just come and talk to me
Absolutely.
anytime.
Absolutely. Isn't that so true? I mean, it's hard. I mean, I would say at smaller institutions, right, we kind of pride ourselves on, we know our students, we know everybody by name. It is hard to learn everybody's name. I've got about 40 students in my FYS freshman year seminar, first year seminar class. Well, the front half of the alphabet is supposed to be there in person on Monday, and the back half of the alphabet is supposed to be there in person on Wednesday. And of course, we're all masked up, and so I'm having to juggle this recording over here. So we're recording all the lectures, but I'm also trying to engage and interact with my students, but we're all wearing masks. And so I'll be walking across campus some days and I'm like, wait a minute, is that one of my students? It kind of looks like mine, but with a mask, I mean, it's hard to even tell who's who. It's just a challenge, right? I mean, you see their eyes, and that's about it. And then they're not in class every day. And now we've got more and more of them who are realizing that, oh, Dr. Steen, I was out late last night, so I'm just gonna watch class remotely today, right? So now they're gaming the system, and on the days they're supposed to be in class, they're just sleeping in and they'll watch it later, right? So, I mean, all of these things are just, it's making it a challenge, right? To say the least, it's definitely a challenge.
So I've got one more
Go for it.
issue so we still do revising on a paper degree plan.
Okay.
Fill that out, and so every time they come in, you may have to redo part of that. One thing that would help us tremendously is if we had, like many schools have, an electronic program that is they pat, and so if they made a D in a class, they had to make a C or better on, that would flag that as well.
Oh, yes, yes.
And then we could
yes.
just log into the portal, pull up that student, we would see what had been filled. It would help us in knowing what to tell them, especially when you have 100 people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or when you're doing, part of your advisees are education and part of them are history and so forth. Instead, you're going back through multiple degree plans or possibly trying to figure out what goes where.
Yeah, and who knows if you got the most up-to-date piece of
And I
paper.
know those programs are out there.
Right, they are. We use DegreeWorks, which is we're a banner institution, and so you guys kind of have a homegrown database, which is.
It's not even a database.
Well, I think it is. It is a database, but and it's convenient in the sense that you can make it do whatever you want to do, but it doesn't always integrate with other software, and there are limitations to that, right?
And for us as advisors, there's a severe limitation of what we
Absolutely.
see
Absolutely.
and have at our fingertips.
Absolutely. So yes, that was one of my 10-year, longer-term recommendations for the institution when I just debriefed with the cabinet to say there has to be some movement, or at least a plan to, what are we going to do for the next 5 years with the institutional student information system? What are we going to do for the next 10 years? Because Dr. Corder is not going to be around forever, right? So at some point, you have to move forward with something that's going to be a little bit more long-term. So yes, that is an excellent point, Let's shift into service excellence, and what does that look like in terms of best practices? So obviously, I would say service excellence is really dependent on all of the interactions that students have with you as an institution, right? The quality of the institution, the reputation of the institution, right? All of that happens or is a result of things that we've already done or who we already are. I did my PhD was branding and higher education, and obviously from a branding perspective, there are things you can do to influence the brand or impact the brand, and there are branding activities that are things meant to influence the brand, but the brand is kind of the brand, right? So your brand or your reputation, in this case, is a conglomeration of all of the things that have already kind of happened and the impressions of those in the past. And it's not one big thing, it's 1,000 little things, right? It's an interaction in the cafeteria. It's a conversation out on a sidewalk. It's an incident that happens before class. It's something that happens in chapel, right? It's 1,000 little things that ultimately influence their reputation and their perspective on the institution. And we can absolutely do things to serve students better, to support students better, to improve quality service, if you will, as faculty, as staff, as administrators. And I think everybody I talk to here believes in that, wants to do that, and really does work here because they want to support students, right? It's weird to think about students sometimes as the customer, and I know, especially outside the business school, a lot of faculty bristle at this whole idea of students as the customer. So I will at least frame it and say it this way. When I say customer, sometimes, I'll try not to say that, I'll try to say student, but in some ways, students are customers in the sense that there are a lot of other options out there. That there's a lot of other institutions that are less expensive than we are. There's a lot of institutions that are more expensive. But from a customer perspective, if students continually have a bad experience or are disappointed in terms of their expectations, they will go somewhere else, right? The flip side of that is if students are struggling, but they love this place, if students are not necessarily the first string starter on the team, but they love this place and they're connected here and they have great connection and engagement here, they're going to stay here, right? So again, this kind of slices both ways, but from a customer perspective, obviously we're trying to get at what is really important to our students. And we know there's a correlation between student satisfaction, student success, graduation rates, retention. All of these things are kind of intertwined, right? When customer service improves, retention typically improves, and eventually graduation rates improve. And that's not to say we're going to save everybody, because we're not, right? We're not. Some people just get here and they can't afford it. Some people, they just can't cut it academically, and that's going to happen. We can't save everybody, but I think by being intentional, we could actually see more students be successful. Poor customer service or quality service can have devastating effects on an institution. I think you would all agree with that, right? I think you've had bad experiences probably at other institutions, and you know what I'm talking about.
What is bad quality service? Not answering emails, like, blowing students off?
So I think the answer to that question is it could be 1,000 little things, right? Yes, it could be my professor never responds to me. Sometimes it's a perception issue. What we feel is reasonable and responsive in their mind may not be quick enough, may not be, we may not be accessible enough, right? And they may perceive it as not good customer service. So some of that is kind of, it's a little nebulous, but I think when I talk about quality service, it's going above and beyond, right? It's really taking an interest in students. It's helping them figure out why they should be here and hopefully helping them reaffirm the decision to come here and ultimately attend Williams Baptist. But poor customer service, I mean, think about if you go to a restaurant and the server, if you have a bad server, right? Don't you kind of walk out of there and be like, gosh, it was horrible. And you remember that, right? It was a poor customer service experience, and it probably influences your decision to go back there, right? And someone wants to go back and, oh, let's go try that restaurant, and you're like, well, okay, I had a bad experience there, right? You remember that, and you probably tell other people about that, right? So again, those are the types of experiences ultimately that shape our opinion. Well, there's 7 key elements, and I promise to crank through these really quick. Your mission and your goals should ultimately drive why we do good customer service, right? So we have to have a clearly defined mission, and I'll pop up the mission statement here. So in reviewing our mission statement, I didn't make this slide yesterday, so shame on me. I got here and I'm like, oh, I meant to put this slide in. So I got it done last night. But we had a faculty member, Robert, yes, who spouted it off word for word, right? So your mission is to provide an excellent, holistically Christian, liberal arts education while compassionately shaping students' lives. I think that probably speaks well to customer service, right? I think that really speaks well to we want to serve students. We want to help them not only grow spiritually, but we want to help them grow in their education, grow academically. And we want to do it in a way that's compassionate, right? That helps them become better citizens and ultimately shapes their lives. That's a brilliant mission statement to say, we want to do better in customer service, and it starts with our mission statement, right? So now we need to set, ultimately, some goals that support, maybe for customer service, that support how do we do customer service better and support that mission statement. Now, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it's going to require money to do it, okay? So we may not be able to snap our finger and say, well, customer service would be better if we had a new student information system, and we're going to go out and buy a $100,000 ERP and go through, 18 months of an implementation, and man, when we get that, we're going to be better advisors, and we're going to serve students better. Is that true? Absolutely. But we may not be able to snap our fingers and come up with $100,000 to go buy Genzabar's latest, greatest ERP software, right? So again, I think there are challenges. Sometimes we have to prioritize. If we had $20,000 to do X, Y, Z, right? Well, what is the ROI on that? Your average net revenue per student, on average, it's about $10K. I use $10K. It may be a little less than that in terms of your discount rate. But your discount rate is close to 50%, so we'll say it's about $10K on average, and when you factor in some room and board, that's probably pretty close. So every student we save is $10,000 to the bottom line. So what if we had a 5% increase in retention, a 5-point increase in retention would save about 30 students. So 30 students at $10,000 each, well, guess what, now we're talking real money. So could we come up with $30,000 to make $300,000 for the university? That's a pretty good ROI return. I think I would take that bet, right? So again, what are some things that we can do? It may cost money, and you're not the CFO, so you can't snap your fingers and maybe get that money. But if we can make a good argument to do that, there may be some things that we need to do to spend some money, right? But ultimately, we got to set some goals. Number 2, passion. You've got some great folks here at WVU. And I think you guys, as I said, wouldn't be here if you weren't passionate about serving students. But it takes passion to ultimately want to do great things or amazing things. And I think that begins kind of, in some senses, from the top down, right? We got to have leaders who are passionate. And I think those leaders need to inspire faculty and staff who are passionate about this place and believe in this place and really want to do something big here at Williams Baptist. I think Stan Norman's pretty passionate about this place, right? And I think you've brought in some good people who are equally as passionate. And so how do we all get kind of excited about what we're doing and then basically make that passion contagious to where students get excited about it, right? And they realize that they want to be here, right? That there's something here that they want to belong to and be a part of, right? So passion, I think, has to be a part of why we're doing what we're doing, but then hopefully it can spread to students as well. It's going to take a team, right? This is not something that Mary was here yesterday or Tanya's here today. I mean, this isn't something that we can just say, okay, Tanya, this is your job. Go fix advising. Go work on customer service. You need to go make that better, right? It's going to take all of us to do that. And obviously, with people getting on board, with people, maybe it's a committee, maybe it's the student success, retention task force, whoever it is, we've got to get folks kind of working on a plan to do this, right? It may require some synergy. So now we're going to have to collaborate and work together, and this is going to be something we're all involved in. And it may be that we're going to leverage this over here to make this over here work better, right? So now we're getting into how to do this in better ways. But ultimately, we'll be better as an institution if we're all bought into this whole idea of customer service and service excellence, right? There's systems and processes that probably need to be evaluated. And I think there's probably some things you guys do really well. I know there are some things. But I think there's also some opportunities for improvement, right? So what are the systems that need to be eliminated or the systems that need to be improved? I guarantee you there are barriers out there that students bump up against year after year after year. Maybe it's the degree plans on paper, and if only we had that electronic option that they could look on their mobile device. Now maybe they can pull it up on the website, right? So maybe there's some workarounds that we can do creatively to say, well, you need to learn to go here, you can access that here, and keep up with that. Maybe it is the student information system that's a barrier and a hurdle. Maybe it's, we spent a lot of time talking about this, was it the finals exam pass or whatever? Like, there's a better way to do that, guys. That's a problem, right? Basically, we don't require students to pay anything until 2 weeks before finals. That's a problem. And now with the end of the semester, when they should be focusing on getting their assignments in, because there's a lot of assignments due at the end of the semester, there's probably an exam, one more exam that they have to finish. Now they're stressed and worried about the fact that we kind of haven't forced them to think about that until almost December. That's a problem, right? So what are some processes that we need to fix and work on and think about that can eliminate some of these barriers, right? Maybe we work a little bit on advising, or we talk about our degree programs. Could they be more student-centric or more friendly, or the way we access those? What kind of academic support or career services? I think there's a gap there, guys, and maybe we need to do a better job with career services and counseling in that area, right? So what are some things that we can do systemically, right, to fix some things that reduce some of the frustrations or some of the issues that can be hurdles for our students, right? Again, this also takes collaboration. We got to work together. Maybe it's a committee, maybe it's a task force, maybe it's a group of you, maybe it's just somebody who just rolls up their sleeve and says, I'm going to fix this issue. I want to work with whoever it takes to get it done, right? And it takes reviewing all your systems. Sometimes it's not the system that's the problem. Sometimes it's the requirements around the system, right? So how we're doing, I don't know, attendance. Maybe that's a source of frustration. I'm making that up. I haven't heard that. But what are the policies and the procedures and the systems that we have in place that are working? And what are the ones that aren't working? And we got to figure that out and try to make those better. Do we have measurable indicators? So if we're gonna be serious about service excellence, well, we need a way to measure that, right? So what are the key indicators that we're gonna measure for student success, for career services, for advising, for customer service? We need to have all of these metrics that are measurable, defined, so that we can monitor. Okay, are we making progress in this area? Are we doing a better job? And that may be that we have to create some ways to celebrate that. Maybe we need to have some measurable benchmarks, right? So however we come up with that, once we set goals and we start implementing some things, how do we measure our success and how we're moving forward? And are we asking the right questions, right? So here's some questions that we need to be asking each other and asking our students and formulating action plans around what we hear back from that. And then obviously we're tracking our progress, taking corrective action. So when a metrics go in the right direction, we keep our foot on the gas. We keep going. We keep doing more of that. When the metric's flat or when the metric continues to go down, we gotta do something about that, right? Obviously, fall to fall retention's a big one, or fall to spring retention, term to term retention. That's a big metric, but it's also kind of a big broad metric. I would say you need to slice it and dice it. So what is our athlete retention rate? What is our non-athlete retention rate? What is our Williams Works retention rate, right? What's working, what's not working? I know we've lost a few of our Williams Works students, and so what are we doing to take some corrective action to fix what out of the gate may have not been the best process or the best system, right? So we've got to have some of those identifiable metrics. We've got to be in touch with our students. We've got to ask them what's important to them, right? They'll tell you what's important to them, but we've got to ask questions. We've got to find out what's keeping them up at night. What are their frustrations, right? Every time I'm here, I hear something that's frustrating about some facilities issue somewhere, right? I think we kind of get a pass during COVID on some of these things. Let's just be honest. We can't do everything that we wanted to this year anyway. But you know, if I can't flush my toilet in the res hall, that's a problem. And if it's still a problem, you know, 6 weeks in, shame on us, right? You know, I'm paying to live on campus, and I expect to be able to flush my toilet. But you know what? Those are real issues sometimes. And every time I go to flush that toilet, guess what? My frustration level just rises and rises and rises to the point where I'm like, forget it, I'm out of here. Or I'm just gonna go live at home. I'm not gonna put up with this. I'm gonna live at home and just commute in every day and not have to deal with this janky res hall stuff, right? Those are real issues. So we have to ask students, what's an issue, what's a problem, what's important to them? We gotta give recognition and awards. So maybe we need to establish some ways to reward those who are doing great things, and maybe that comes from the top down, but we have to celebrate our success in these areas, right? And if there's a high performer, or if there's a new strategy we've rolled out, and a semester in, we've got some great results on it, we need to celebrate that and communicate that, and continue to acknowledge and replicate that. So these are kind of the big things that I would say help us improve customer service, help us improve service excellence, and hopefully, I think you would all agree those are important things, but hopefully we can keep the dialogue going, the conversation going around what we should be doing or how we could be doing some things differently, right? Obviously, it's going to take all of us. If we're going to do better, we have to work harder and we have to work together to do it. It goes without saying that poor quality customer service will have negative effects on the institution. If we make it a priority, obviously it'll be a priority. So how do we move forward, right? What do we do differently? What is something that we can do a takeaway as a next step? And I would say, one thing is, I would love to know from your perspective, like, what are we doing well, right? I was kind of asking earlier, like, what are some challenges in terms of advising, but what are we doing well here at Williams Baptist? Surely we're doing something well, right?
Huh?
I actually met with a student this morning who, sophomore, transferred from a larger state school. Had a conversation about class. He mentioned that just what a change it was. He seemed like just having access to me. And
Absolutely.
you know, that smaller class sizes
Yeah.
and that face-to-face, one-on-one interaction with students.
Yeah.
Well, that came out in the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's something that probably unless a student has been at another institution, or been at a state institution, or been at a large institution, I don't know that they'll appreciate that. But that's a real thing, right? When I can actually go talk to my professor, and my professor will take time to sit down and have a conversation with me and knows me, those are real issues. And I think students definitely value and appreciate that. That's awesome. What else? Yeah.
Yeah, to build on that, you know, English department, much smaller, department, we know our students well. Like
Yeah.
I can tell you what they're into, what they like, that sort of thing. I went to a big state school, and it's,
Yeah.
it's crazy how different their experience was than mine.
Yeah.
You know, for the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's good.
Yeah, that's good. And I think they're at least perceptive enough to know if I'm gonna go to a small school like Williams Baptist as opposed to an ASU down the road or something, hopefully they appreciate the small class sizes, the personal attention, the fact that they will get to know their faculty members. And I think they come here with that expectation, right? And so sometimes if we don't deliver on that, that can almost kind of be a big oopsie, right? Well, I thought you would be more engaged or more interested in my success here at a small institution. So I think that's absolutely true. Is there anything else you would say we do really well, or something that you're really proud of, something you hear from students that they appreciate about this place, or?
Well, I think just the fact that they have a professor teaching their class instead of
Yes.
teaching assistant teaching their class.
Absolutely.
I hear that from some students.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are real things. And so, I think the point is, how do we build on those things? Or how do we leverage those things that we do really, 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 really well to either compensate maybe for some things we don't do well, or to compensate for some things that maybe we don't have that larger state institutions have, right? How do we leverage what we're good at? So I think that's a big part of this process. But I know there's challenges. I think there's challenges with COVID. There's challenges with this current pandemic that we're in. And I know there may be additional resources that we need. So I don't know, what are challenges or wish list items that you would say, you know, that need to be on the radar, that need to be communicated?
Well, the biggest thing that we've noticed this semester consistently is problems with our bookstore provider.
Interesting, okay, I haven't heard that.
I know
one.
we have a commitment, I wanna just be frank, we have a commitment to the new administration that will change by next fall.
Okay,
But currently, we're using a provider that, we literally have students that we still encounter. that says,
Provider.
"I never-"
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
provider is a
they don't-
strong term.
yeah,
a provider, they still don't have books from these people.
Right,
Wow.
that they
We're
ordered
at the
way
seventh or eighth
before
week.
the semester, yes.
Wow.
So that's been a huge issue, and the students are equally upset about that, because they have to use their financial aid to purchase books, they have to go through that provider to do it.
Mhm.
We're on week 8, and they don't have a book.
That's crazy.
Now, I would argue by week 8, most of those issues have been fixed, but
Sure.
we had one this last week, right?
Wow.
Yours.
Wow, still waiting. That's unacceptable. And then Amazon can get it here in 24 hours practically, or at least 48 hours.
So that's an institutional thing that we have to fix.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, that's one of those frustrations. And again, there is nothing that will neutralize a frustration like that than you just saying, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Like if instead of, you know, it's that empathy, right? If you can just put yourself in those shoes and say, I am so sorry. This is unacceptable. I know the university administration is working on this issue. We've never had this issue before, and we are not gonna have this same provider next year. And you know what? Don't worry about it. Here's a copy I can loan you,
But of
or,
course, that brings up
you
with
know.
COVID and with
that's true.
doing the digital, and you
That's
have so
true.
many more things to do.
Uh-huh.
It's even
Absolutely.
harder to get the copy for them and get that to them, and
Oh, it's ridiculous. I know my kids can't even turn in things, like you can't even turn paper anymore, like they have to turn everything in through their LMS in school, right? I mean, anyway, it's crazy. But you're right, that is an unacceptable frustration, obviously, that we have to fix. But when you can then kind of flip it and students go, wow, you know, he really cares about that, or, you know, my professor went to the administration or appealed on my behalf to financial aid, or, you know, those are the types of things when a bad situation sometimes can become a good situation, right? A positive thing, right? So I think there's opportunities even there to take something kind of negative and even make it, you know, get it somewhat in the plus column. So I don't know, other challenges, other concerns?
I think, you know, when I'm looking at challenges, I think Williams is a challenge. And what I mean by that is, I coach a lot of, just kids that are not from rural Arkansas.
That's
true. So-
yes.
You know, there's challenges that we have zero control over, like
Yes.
location, you know, where we're located, the mosquitoes. You know, we laugh about it, but
Yeah,
that's really, it's a hell bird.
yeah,
But I think what we have to focus on is, you know, and I know Dr. Norman talks about, you know, us, like be us. That's what we, you know, that's already the challenge.
yeah, yeah,
And then when you have the textbook issue, and then you have you made the joke about the toilet, but it does happen.
sure.
And then you have a professor or a coach or whatever that takes 2 weeks to respond.
Right,
It just piles on top of already, when you move in, you're already moving to a challenging place.
absolutely.
And one thing I think the one thing I like what we're trying to do is we're trying to be us.
Yeah,
We don't need to try to be like Houston Baptist.
right,
We can't out Washita Baptist.
sure.
So we just need to focus on, and let me use a coaching term, winning at what we already have.
Absolutely,
And I think like what Ronnie said, that's perfect, like about, that's unacceptable on textbook. I mean, you're at a
Absolutely.
university.
absolutely.
We ought to have textbooks ready to roll,
Absolutely, yeah.
so.
That's a great point. And going back to branding, you know, from a branding perspective, you got to know who you are, right? You can't communicate something that you're not, and you can't be who you're not, right? So you gotta know who you are and you gotta be who you are. I like that. I completely agree with that. So you're not gonna come here, right, and have, you know, Starbucks across the street, you know, go hang out at Starbucks. I mean, that's, you're not gonna have that. But what we do have is, you know, right? So what's the alternative to that? So if you come here, yes, we don't have a Walmart across the street, but what we do have is, you know, so you kind of have to be who you are. And I think there's wisdom, but there's also sometimes a lot of leverage in that, because the right student, that'll resonate with them. Absolutely.
The emails are just unbelievable, like, the amount of emails, I'm trying to keep track of who's sick and who's not, who's goofing. I've had to give up on some things, just like,
Yeah.
I can't keep track.
Yeah.
Or else it's all I'm gonna do, or else I'm not gonna get my grades in.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
Sucks.
that's a real thing. I know we're supposed to keep attendance, and with everybody watching things and doing things remotely, you know, I keep having to go in and see, okay, who's watched the video now? Okay, now I can go check them as having attended, you know, but they're supposed to do it by midnight on Sunday, but then, you know, then they're blowing my email up saying, why do you have me as not attended? I went and watched the video. I'm like, well, last time I checked, you hadn't. Let me go back in one more time. I mean, so it's all of that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this whole distancing and remote delivery, I mean, it's twice as much work, maybe more than twice as much work, because you're still having to do it in person, but you're also having to do everything on the remote side, right? So yeah, those are real challenges. But I don't want to say the thing I worry about, I don't think this is a reality yet. The thing I worry about is now we're creating future expectations of, well, you did that for me last semester, so why can't you just live stream it this semester, right? Or so here we go again. So I don't know, this whole thing is changing higher ed in ways that we have yet to realize. So, okay, I have kept you over an hour at this point. So that's all I had for you, but one of my recommendations is gonna be, we kind of teed up a conversation. Hopefully we generated some thoughts, some conversation afterwards. I know we've got a task force working on retention and how to make that better, and part of that is advising, and part of that is customer service and all the student services that we're offering. How do we do that? So please be a part of that process. Come up with a definition of advising and make that something that then we can distribute around campus and say, hey, these are our goals and this is how we want to do this better. We've got an idea for something that will benefit students and how we can take that to the next level, right? So again, this is not a be-all, end-all. If anything, this is just an opportunity for you to kind of pause, take a break, grab a little lunch, maybe get a snack, but then hopefully think about, hey, how do we do things better here, right? How do we move the ball forward? So that's all I had for you, but I think there are maybe some door prizes that we have for.
Do I have everyone's little slip before we start? These are just little thank yous. Thank you so much for taking time today to come and thank you for all that you do. Okay, and draw first. Melinda Williams. Yay! Melinda!
You like that blanket?
Yeah.
Okay. And your Avery Watson.
I wrote his name
Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. We appreciate it.